Hello and welcome to episode 54 of MMO Weekly presented by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with my co-host and MMO executive editor, Mike Mayer. And Mike, the fire sale, liquidation, spirit Halloween clearance, whatever you want to call it, the Mets are selling. Since the last time we spoke, the Mets have traded David Robertson, obviously traded Max Scherzer. Mark Canha just went a few minutes ago to the Brewers, and now hearing talks of Justin Verlander, trade talks heating up with some teams. Just want to get your reaction to everything, and we'll break it down kind of one by one, but just your initial thoughts on the last few days here, what's been happening.
Yeah, I think Robertson was always a no-brainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trading him. Um, Once the Mets decided that they weren't going for it, he was a rental and he was one of the best relievers on the market, so you're definitely going to sell him. Um, and then Scherzer didn't like that, which rightfully so, right? That's why Scherzer, Verlander, that's why a lot of these guys came to the Mets at older ages on short-term deals because they thought the Mets were a team that was going to win this year. So I don't think you can really fault Scherzer for being a little upset at the Mets essentially waving the white flag. And he talked to the Mets brass about the direction. Obviously, they told him they were selling, and he pretty clearly wanted to go to a team that was going to win this year or is winning and has a chance to win it all this year. And he went to the Rangers. And yeah, again, I don't blame really Scherzer or Justin Verlander, who we're going to talk about too. Both of these guys are on the back end of their careers, and that's all they want to do is win. They've done everything else. Both of them have multiple Cy Youngs. They've got all the accolades that are out there. They just want to they want to win as they go out. So I don't blame either of these guys if that's what they decide they want to do. Scherzer obviously did, and if Verlander okays the deal, then he's obviously making that decision too. So yeah, the Mets are going to sell more pieces. We talked about Robertson, Scherzer. Just a little bit before we came on tonight, they traded Mark Canha to the Brewers. Tommy Pham's certainly going to go. Brooks Raley's getting a ton of attention. He could
Mm-hmm.
go. Jose Quintana, you never know. It's the market is bad for pitching.
Sure.
For teams that are buying, it's
Right.
great for sellers,
Right.
which is a reason why you have the Mets selling off Max Scherzer, potentially Justin Verlander, potentially Brooks Raley, who still is controllable for next year if you pick up his option at a reasonable rate. So I think what the Mets are really doing, more so than having a fire sale, is I think they're really taking advantage of what's out there right now. We've seen what teams have given up for pitching. You saw what the D-backs gave up for Paul Sewald.
Mm-hmm.
You saw what the Braves gave up for Pierce Johnson, who hasn't been good this year. They gave up a couple of legitimate prospects for him. So I think the Mets are more taking advantage of what the market is right now. And that's a seller's market for pitching because there isn't a ton out there because there's not too many sellers, right? And the Mets are smart too because it's a pretty strong free agency group that's coming up when it comes to pitching, particularly starting pitching. So yeah, I think the Mets are doing the right thing for the most part, with the assumption that they replace Scherzer and Verlander in the rotation. We know we've already heard that they're interested in another Japanese right-hander. So that would be a type of guy that he's ace material. So yeah, I think the Mets are kind of doing what they should. And we'll see what else happens. Maybe Verlander doesn't get traded, although it sounds between the Astros and Dodgers being interested. I know the Orioles have been thrown out there. The Reds have shown a ton of interest too, but um, you have to think Verlander's going to pick and choose kind of where he wants. He almost signed with the Dodgers this offseason, so that would certainly be a place that he would be comfortable with. He's played in Houston, so obviously that's yes. Cincy and Baltimore, obviously two up and coming teams, but I'm not so sure. You just don't know if that's where he wants to go. Obviously, both those teams have the young pieces to make it happen for Verlander, as do the Dodgers. I think the Astros are probably the team that have the least amount to trade out of all four of the ones we've mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it sounds like, at least right now from the reports, that things could get pretty serious with Verlander, and I think the Mets would like to do something tonight if they're going to do something with him. We're talking on Monday night. I think they would like to, just because, look, there's a lot of stuff to work out when you're dealing Verlander. His vesting option for the 2025 season, if he
Mm-hmm.
pitches 140 innings, I'm sure some teams would like to kind of potentially adjust that, make some changes there, or Verlander might want to make a change there. So let's see what that happens. And of course, you have to get him to waive his no trade too. And there's going to be money involved, just like there was with the Scherzer deal. So it takes MLB approval. Um, it's the type of deal that's pretty complicated, and more so when you're talking about it, it feels like there's probably three or four teams that are legitimately involved here, and have pretty good pieces to give the Mets. So it's going to be an interesting till 6 p.m. on Tuesday to see
Yeah.
exactly what else the Mets do.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to Verlander in a second, because I do think it's interesting, and I think we disagree a little bit on what the Mets should do there. As far as Robertson's concerned, real quick, were you surprised at all that they traded him that early with like 5 days left? I would have thought with the reliever market how it is, he's having a good year. You hold on to him a little bit more to try and get a better package. I was just kind of a little surprised that it happened, kind of as early as it did there. So I was just kind of your thoughts real quick on that.
No, not at all. I think when a team offers you a player that you covet, like they do with Marco Vargas, who's going to be in a lot of top 100 lists come this offseason, I think that's something you jump on. And I don't think you just don't know what's going to be out there too, because you don't know what other teams are going to make players available. You don't know, the Marlins could have moved on and acquired a different piece, and then
Sure.
that's not even an option. And maybe all the other teams that are looking for a closer aren't willing to give you as much or give you the particular pieces that you happen to covet. Look, I mean, the Padres could have lost their next three games and they'd be sellers, and Josh Hader would be on the market.
Right.
So, I mean, all these things kind of change day to day. I think, I mean, maybe you could have waited a little longer, but all in all, the Mets got really good value for David Robertson. I mean, we're talking about a 38-year-old pitcher that you're renting for 2.5 months, to get a borderline top 100 guy and another prospect that's going to be in the Mets. I think I have him 15th right now. Depending on all the other prospects that the Mets get, that could change. But I mean, I have Vargas at number 5 in my ranking and Hernandez at number 15. So I mean, that's pretty good value for 2 months of uh, David Robertson. So
Right.
I think in the end, they got a ton of value for what they gave up.
Interesting, and I agree in that respect. An almost 40-year-old reliever is having a good year, like you said, expendable to get two prospects like that. I wasn't up in arms as kind of the rest of the fan base was. I just thought it was a little, like I said, personally, you think maybe you hang on a little bit longer, but as far as what you're saying, I understand there. With Scherzer, um, interesting how quickly that all happened, right? Kind of, it felt like Scherzer made the comments that he had to talk to the front office about what was going on, and then he got shipped out. Um, I think him and Verlander are two different cases for me. I like the fact that they were able to move on from Scherzer. And listen, you can call his tenure. It was very up and down. When he was healthy, he pitched well. Obviously, the end of last year, he put out a stinker. And this year just hasn't been very good. And especially the home runs given up. I think it's 22. I don't know if he's given up any more, if he gave up any more his last start, but it was the last time I saw 22 home runs allowed. He just really has not looked good. So to get a prospect like Luis Angel Acuna, I think is great. We'll see what happens. Obviously, be a few years away, where we really know. But I know that he immediately slots in as the Mets' number one ranked prospect. Obviously, had to do some finagling with the financials as far as what they're picking up for Scherzer. But I think they got the best that they could there. I think that's really good. It was very funny that Scherzer got traded to Texas and immediately said, "I'm going to opt into my $43 million next year in my non tax in Texas." But it'll be interesting. I just think about how short the tenure was and kind of how everything kind of fizzled out. A lot of my friends are saying that it reminds them a lot of Tom Glavine. Scherzer's kind of tenure. I could see that a bit. Obviously, Glavine was here longer than Scherzer was. But I think more than anything, that signing to take the positives, it was a sign of changing of the guard with ownership, right? That they were serious. Cohen was serious to spend and to put out a winner. So although it didn't work out as far as with the World Series or any deep playoff runs, I think it at least signified to the rest of the sport that the Mets were going to be big players from here on out. So, for that, I think it was good. You wish them the best
No,
in Texas, but,
yeah, I want to agree with you there. I think for the most part, Scherzer worked out, right? Like you talked about it, it showed everyone else, hey, we're going to spend whatever we want if we're going to get the best players. And that's what they did. They got the best player on the market in Scherzer. Look, he was one of the best pitchers in the National League for 95% of last season.
sure.
Obviously, it stinks that he kind of crumbled at the end, but he was really, really good until then. He's a big reason why they won 101 games. Um, this year, yeah, I agree with you. I think Verlander right now is the better bet to be a good pitcher the rest
Yep.
of this year and for next year. Scherzer's velocity's down, his movement's down. Teams are crushing his slider, and Max Scherzer, without his best pitch, is a middle of the rotation guy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more of what Scherzer looks like. Honestly, with that in mind, and the amount of money that he was still owed, I think the Mets again did really well in getting
Yeah.
Acuna. This is a borderline top 50 prospect in the
Mm-hmm.
game. So to be able to get him for a pitcher that's showing obvious signs of decline,
Right.
and even, I mean, the Mets didn't cover all the money, so the Rangers do have to still pay him 22 million. So I think the Mets did really well in getting Acuna, and obviously props to Cohen for willing
Sure.
to eat that sort of money to get the
Yep.
better prospect back. I mean, that's why you're getting Acuna,
Mm-hmm.
is because he decided to eat all that money. So yeah, I think Epler did really well there. I think he he got a lot of value for Scherzer, and I think he did pretty good in the Canada deal too. They got Justin Jarvis, who's a right-handed starter, who started off in Double A this year, looked really good. He's only had three Triple A starts, haven't been good, but we're talking about the International League, which if Mets fans have been paying attention to, like what Luke Voigt's doing and Abraham Almonte is doing, it's like playing on the moon in that league this year. So it's extremely tough to judge what pitchers are doing. But look, Jarvis is a guy that Baseball America had up to 12th on the Brewers' top 30 list with their updated midseason rankings. So to be able to get a guy that's that type of upside, and look, the Mets, everyone's talked about that they need pitching at the top end of their system, which I think has been overstated a little bit, but that's what they got in Jarvis, right? That's what people have been looking for, so that's what they got in Jarvis. I guess the one downside is he has to be added to the 40-man roster this offseason to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. I think that's pretty clear that the Mets will probably do that, considering um, look, especially if they trade like Verlander,
Sure.
or they trade another pitcher, they're going to need arms. So, yeah, I think so. That's three trades. And going back to the Escobar trade, I think that's four trades
Right.
that Epler has done that have looked very well. We don't need to talk about the Trevor Gott trade, I guess, because that's that's a different story. But yeah, I think Epler continued to do well with the Cano trade. That's look, you weren't going to get much for Canada. He's an older outfielder
Right.
that hasn't been great. He's been around league average this year, and he has an option for next year at 11.5 million and a $2 million buyout. So there just wasn't a ton that you were going to get there. So I think if you told Mets fans before you trade them, hey, you're going to get the number 12 prospect in someone's farm system, regardless of who it was, I think they would be elated. So I think Epler did a good job there, and it just kind of look, they've gotten different types of pieces, right? In the Marlins deal, they went for the biggest upside, right? That's what they're getting with Vargas in regardless of age. With Acuna, they got a guy who's got a ton of upside and he's in Double A. This is a guy that could help the Mets out maybe next year at some point. Um, And then with Jarvis, they get a guy that likely pitches, and I mean, he might pitch in the major leagues later this year,
Right.
if not the start of next year at some point. So they've got a good mixture of pieces so far, and I think they're going to get a pretty good prospect or two for Tommy Pham too.
Sure.
He's I mean, you want to talk about a seller's market for pitchers? It is for hitters too.
Right.
There's nothing on the trade market for hitters. I mean, Tommy Pham is one of the best hitters available, and that's why we've heard so many teams interest. The Twins, they've talked to the Twins about him. Blue Jays are a team interested there. Even the Yankees have talked to the Mets about Pham. We'll see if they want to. The Yankees and Mets want to do a deal, but there's Dodgers. There's a couple other teams I've heard too. I mean, there's a lot of interest in Pham, and I think the Mets are likely going to do pretty well there. I think. So I think the biggest question is they're obviously going to trade Pham. Verlander with the Astros and Dodgers getting pretty serious, it sounds like right now. It looks like there's a good chance Verlander gets dealt. So who after that, I guess, is the question. Is there any other pieces? Well, maybe they trade Vogel back. I mean, you're not going to get much back, but between Vogelback, Carlos Carrasco, you're kind of just releasing a roster spot so you can
Hmm.
see what other guys have. Like with Vogelback, that opens up Vientos to get significant playing time. With Carrasco, it allows you to see what you got in Peterson,
Hmm.
McGill, maybe some other arms. Look, that the Mets have already waved the white flag, so it would be better to get some of these younger guys some reps instead of like Carrasco, Vogelback, even Narvaez. I mean, some teams are looking for catcher, and there's not a ton out there. So, I mean, there's a chance someone wants to take on his contract. Um, Ottavino, I think the Mets will probably hold on to just because he's got a relatively cheap option for next year. That look, they need bullpen guys. So maybe if they decide to hold on to Rayleigh, maybe they'll see what they can get for Ottavino. But I wouldn't expect Ottavino and Rayleigh to get dealt. But with Rayleigh, he has a pretty cheap option for next
Sure.
year at 6.25 million. But it again goes back to this just a seller's market for pitching, and there's nothing out there for left-handed relievers. I think maybe kind of crazy to say, but Brad Hand might be like outside of Brooks Raley, he might be one of the best left-handed relievers out there. So that kind of gives you an idea of just what the Mets hold for a chip. And I know Rayleigh's pitched great this year, but you're talking about a 36-year-old reliever that has had like what, two good seasons total in the big
Right.
leagues. So if you can get a pretty good prospect for Rayleigh, I think that's something that you do too.
Yeah, I agree with all the short-term rentals, the veterans. I think they should be put out. Personally, I would have liked to have seen, or I would like to see players that have control for 20 that are controlled for 2024 and beyond. I would have liked to see them held on to, because I would assume, or not assume, but whoever they hire to be the president of baseball this offseason, I'd like to see them construct the roster for next year kind of the way they want. So I don't love getting rid of controllable guys. And as far as Verlander is concerned, I agree that he, out of the two, Verlander and Scherzer, he looks like he's got more in the tank for this year and next year. And the Mets simply going to need pitching. Outside of the bullpen, they're going to need starting pitching too. You've already paid him. You need someone to head the rotation. So I wouldn't be giving him away, or I wouldn't be trading him away. I understand it's a seller's market and all that, but if he's willing to stay here and give it another try next year, if he personally hasn't waved that white flag, he's not someone I would get would flip. I think that would be also just pretty disastrous in general, just for this year. Just a 2-year deal and not even finish the season. So I'd like to see them hang on to Verlander, to head for next year. And, guys like Canna, Pham, like you said, anything you got for Canna that was good, that's a decent arm. Imagine Pham, whatever they'll get. I saw something on Twitter, I don't know if it's true at all, that the Mets were discussing trying to reacquire Pete Crow Armstrong, and we're talking about Pham and Brooks Raley, and that the Cubs were considering it. I don't know how they would consider that, considering Armstrong's
No,
the number 7 prospect in all baseball.
no.
If they want to, that would be great, but I don't think they're gonna.
No.
That was some weird thing I saw. I'm sure it was just all speculation, but whatever you get out of the expiring contracts, it's a plus, right? Instead of them walking and not getting anything. So it's pretty remarkable that they're at this point. It's, history will not be kind to this 2023 Mets team. Everybody thought 1991 was the worst team money could buy. This is going to blow that right out of the water, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the biggest overall thing is just how disappointing this season has been, considering what they did in the offseason. But I think at least you can take some positive in the fact that Epler was able to shift quickly and turn this into a selling team and has done a good job with it so far. So I think that's a positive that you can take out of it.
Absolutely. And I think one positive that they could do, even if they sell, let's say they sell Verlander, whatever, and they kind of, you don't want to call it a fire sale. That's kind of what that is if you're doing all that. But if you want to make the fan base happy, I would immediately follow that with a Pete Alonso extension. That would be a nice thing to kind of be like, hey, we understand this year's a wash, but this isn't a rebuild. We're retooling. We're keeping our cornerstone pieces. That would be a very nice message to the fan base looking out as beyond from this year. I don't know what you think, but I feel like that would be a nice would tamper things a little bit at least.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I know that it's something both sides want to do anyway. So, I mean, if you want to talk about optics, that would certainly be good for optics for Steve Cohen to be like, well, we traded those guys, but
Right.
hey, we still got this core in place. These are the guys that we want. We're still going to win with the guys we got. I'm still going to add this offseason. So this is kind of a jump start on the offseason is getting Pete here long term. So yeah, no, I think that would be something smart.
Yeah, so it probably won't happen, but anything's possible. We'll see. It's just it's going to be constant refreshing and scrolling between now and 6 p.m. tomorrow. That's all I have for the show today, Mike. I don't know if you have anything, if you want to have any minor league notes or anything like that. But it's just going to be a crazy next, I don't know, 18 hours, whatever you want to call it.
No, yeah, and I think the only thing I'll know with the minor leagues is all the promotions. Blade Tidwell to Double A,
Sure.
Jet Williams, Jacob Reimer to High A. Um, so that's it's good to see that all these guys are performing pretty well. So and we'll see who comes up from Syracuse, right?
Right.
The Mets already need one position player to replace Canna. Going to need two when they replace Bam. So maybe it's the time that Ronnie Mauricio
Right.
gets called up. So
Mm-hmm.
that'll be a post trade deadline storyline to follow.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode. We'll catch you next week after the dust has settled with this year's trade deadline. We'll see who's still a Met, who's not, and what they can do to kind of salvage what has been an extremely disappointing 2023 season. But until then, everybody, let's go Mets.